American weapons and military equipment. It is thanks to them that Ukraine can resist Russian aggression. Now, Washington is withholding all military aid to ascertain whether it contributes to resolving the conflict. This decision was allegedly supported by all of Donald Trump's advisors without exception.
The president is actually taking a much more realistic perspective and saying this can't go on forever. We can't fund this thing forever. The Ukrainians can't fight forever. So let's bring this thing to a peaceful settlement.
The decision to stop the delivery of US weapons to the front lines also applies to those already in Poland awaiting further transport, and, according to Bloomberg, they will stay here for the time being. The White House stresses that Volodymyr Zelenskiy may return to Washington for talks if he is ready for peace. For now, he has left a terrible impression, taking a confrontational tone during Friday's meeting in the Oval Office.
You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You haven't been alone.
In this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military equipment, and you men are brave, but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have our military equipment, if you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
Less. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us because, as you know, that's right there. That's the border.
Today, Donald Trump is expected to give the State of the Union address in which he will likely once again outline the war's perspective and proposal to end the war in Ukraine. But this requires the signing of the agreement on access to Ukrainian rare earth minerals.
Strona amerykańska z całą pewnością chce w ramach negocjacji wywrzeć presję.
The US side certainly wants to put pressure on Kiev as part of the negotiations in order to obtain important elements on its part, such as, for example, access to potential raw material deposits that are located on Ukrainian territory. Even just this, an American economic presence, would be a very important safeguard of Ukraine's independence. The Ukrainian Prime Minister announced today that his country is ready to sign the agreement with the Americans at any time. The Ukrainian government has just officially approved the agreement with the Americans, and from our side we can sign it at any time to start cooperation with the US on clear terms. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time and in any convenient format. We see this agreement as a step towards greater security and solid security guarantees, and I truly hope it will work effectively.
Mr. President!
Republican congressmen and Ukrainian politicians are already working on the details of how to return to talks. We are 100% getting this train back on the tracks. This mineral deal will be signed in short order, which will lead to a strong, long-term economic partnership between the United States and Ukraine, and which will ultimately and naturally lead to security assistance. Europe will be required to step up and do its part, and there will be mandates for them to do just that.
Ukraine, вся Европа, America.
Ukraine, Europe, but also America. Only together can we ensure decades of peace. It is necessary to act together and accelerate diplomatic efforts to end the war. The London summit, with mainly left-wing European politicians, only convinced the Ukrainian Prime Minister to reach an agreement with America as soon as possible, as only America can stop Putin. Europe is not a substitute for the United States, and Trump must be reckoned with. There is no United States of Europe. Europe is not a substitute for the world's first army and the world's first currency, and won't be for the foreseeable future. Maybe Volodymyr Zelenskiy understood this when the Ukrainian delegation was ejected from the White House, or perhaps it took until the London summit. Without the United States, there will be no peace in Ukraine. Conditions are being negotiated between the United States and Ukraine, to which both Ukraine and Russia will have to agree under American pressure to a ceasefire, to a halt to this conflict. What exactly is going on there, we do not know. I just think that President Zelenskiy should not have behaved in the way he did at the White House. It was bad conduct. There is still hope for Ukraine, but this may be the last chance to save many ordinary people from Russian aggression and start peace negotiations. There will be no better offer than what is being offered by the Americans. Donald Tusk said that the financial package prepared by Brussels is expected to be discussed later today, and a decision on it is expected to be made at an extraordinary meeting of the European Council on Thursday. Somewhat similar to what happened during COVID, but the scale is larger, because we are talking in this case about 150 billion euros to be borrowed directly for defence and the defence industry. And these will be loans guaranteed by the European Union budget. Question is, where should the equipment that the announced EU loans would finance come from? Looking at the civic platform's traditional allies, not likely from the United States. Roman Giertych calls for a change in alliances. I think it should be seriously considered whether it makes sense to buy US weapons in this situation. We need it fast, so supplies from France can come faster, and from Korea too. Mr. Roman Giertych is an MP and he has the right to express his views. He is neither the Minister of National Defence nor is he the Prime Minister. So please turn to him for interpretations. It is the Americans who guarantee security. They are the only guarantor of security. They have the financial backing, the military backing. They are a power, a world power that everyone has to reckon with. This is a given. So if someone is pulling his punches in an alliance with the Americans, that means it's verging on treason. Because since Friday's Trump-Zelenskiy conversation, Donald Tusk, like his partners in Germany, France and Brussels, has been trying to convince himself that Europe is capable of strengthening its own defence. They are counting on the Germans or the French to take over those contracts that were made by the Polish government with the Americans. Only the main problem is that this German and French equipment is much worse than American equipment. The delivery time is much longer, and the price is also much higher. The old EU countries have returned with plans to create a force in Europe equivalent to the US-dominated NATO. We certainly need to maintain this alliance because it is in Poland's interest, but alternative actions here must also be carried out. We cannot be doomed to the fate of the United States alone. As Europe, we must wake up. Talking about some kind of strategic autonomy as a counter to NATO, deluding oneself into thinking that security structures can be built within the framework of the European Union is dangerous for Polish citizens and for Poland's security. The problem is that for the civic platform, the United States, the strongest NATO country, is not a major ally. This is what Radosław Sikorski, the former and current head of the Foreign Ministry, said about it 11 years ago.
Wiesz, że sojusz polsko-amerykański jest nic nie
You know
warty.
that the Polish-American
Jest
alliance is a
szkodliwe.
worthless
Stwarza
thing. It
Polsce
is even
fałszywe
harmful
poczucie
because it creates a false
bezpieczeństwa.
sense of
Dlaczego?
security.
Bullshit.
Complete bull.
Skonfliktujemy się z
We'll
Niemcami
conflict
i
with Germany,
Francuzami.
with Russia.
Będziemy
We'll think
uważali,
everything
że
is great
wszystko
because
jest
we've done the
super,
Americans
bo
a favor.
zrobiliśmy
Suckers,
laskę
complete
Amerykanom.
suckers. That's why today's action by the Tusk government is rather surprising.
Donald Tusk jest jednym z liderów europejskich
Donald
procesów
Tusk is one of the
wypychania
European
Stanów
leaders of the
Zjednoczonych
process of
z
pushing the
Europy.
United
I to
States out
grozi
of Europe.
bezpieczeństwu nie tylko
And this
Polski,
threatens
ale
the
też
security not only of
całemu
Poland,
Sojuszowi
but also of the entire
Północnoatlantyckiemu,
North Atlantic
ponieważ
Alliance,
jego fundamentem
because its
jest właśnie
foundation is
siła
the strength of the US
USA,
Army, the
najpotężniejszej
most powerful army in the
na
world.
świecie.
Życie nie znosi próżni. Jeżeli Ameryka wycofała
Life abhors a vacuum. If the US withdrew from Europe, there would be a vacuum that someone would have to fill. We would either have to deal with Russia's imperial ambitions or Germany's quest for hegemony. Neither of these options, I think, is favourable for Poland. The Polish ambassador Bogdan Klich still unrecognised by Polish President Andrzej Duda. This shows the intentions of the December 13th coalition.
Stawia na relacje z Niemcami, a nie z Amerykanami.
He is betting on relations with Germany, not with the Americans, because if he were betting on relations with the Americans, he would have sent a professional to Washington, a professional diplomat who can arrange normal relations, not a man who insulted Donald Trump. This is what Donald Tusk is not doing. He himself is not welcome in the White House either. Fortunately, President Andrzej Duda, known for his excellent relations with President Donald Trump, still sits in the presidential palace. Interestingly, even participants in Tusk's coalition have noted President Duda's contributions to the Polish-American alliance.
Bardzo dużo robi pan prezydent Duda.
A great deal is being done by President Duda and has been done. And here you really have to praise the President. And our government also emphasises that ours, because it is a joint government, and yours and mine, and all of ours, all Poles, and we all emphasise that this alliance is really important. The problem is that such appreciation of the President's role is a rather new thing in the actions of the smiling coalition.
administracja amerykańska nie traktuje
The
poważnie.
American administration does not take the Polish government seriously. The partner for the US administration is President Andrzej Duda, and that is why everything possible must be done so that after the 18th of May or the 1st of June, Karol Nawrocki will become the new president of Poland and will become a great partner for the United States. We have a very good relationship with this president and his immediate environment. We should do nothing, and I hope that those in power will do nothing of the sort to spoil these relations, because relations with the United States are guarantees of security for Poland and Europe.
Such images are an increasingly common sight in Germany. The speeding car looks like this afterwards. But this is no accident. A 40-year-old man deliberately drove into a crowd of people in the center of Mannheim. My stand was shaking. I looked out of the window and thought, what is that? I saw a car hurtling at full speed, and then I saw a man flying over the car. People started screaming and running away. 2 people were killed as a result of the attack. A dozen were injured. We sympathize with the families of the 2 people who died. We wish the injured a speedy recovery. I particularly sympathize with the people of Mannheim, who once again have to face such a terrible event. This is a horror in broad daylight. It is simply an unimaginably terrible act. I am sure that the investigators will do everything in their power to clear up this crime. The perpetrator is Alexander S. The killer has been arrested. During his detention, the murderer attempted to commit suicide by shooting himself in the mouth with a pistol. Allegedly, the man used blanks for this attempt. He is currently in hospital in critical condition. We have concrete indications that the perpetrator was mentally ill. The investigation is therefore focusing on this aspect. We have obtained a search warrant for the perpetrator's house. We are trying to find out more about the perpetrator's past and motivations. In the man's car, investigators found a note. It is supposed to prove the intentionality of the attack. The vehicle's braking distance was described on it, among other things. According to the police, the perpetrator of the attack in Mannheim already had a criminal record. Over 10 years ago, he was convicted of assault. There could have been many more victims, but within minutes, a large police force was on the scene. However, this does not reassure the residents of Mannheim, who are facing tragedy for the second time in a few months. We are no longer safe on the streets. People are afraid to move freely, no matter where they are, even during the day. It seems to me that it is like America. There you can be shot in the street. Here, you get hit by a car. On May 31st last year, a knife attack took place in the city center. A 25-year-old Afghan man injured the police officer trying to stop him. The officer paid for this intervention with his life. What happened came as a shock to me, especially after what happened to a police officer a few months ago. Now it's happening again. It's terrifying. This crime is one of several recent offenses in which a car has been used as a weapon. In mid-February, a similar incident occurred in Munich. A 24-year-old Afghan man drove his car into protest participants. 2 people were killed, a 2-year-old girl and her mother. 6 dead, almost 300 injured. This is the result of an attack carried out by a 50-year-old Saudi man at a Christmas market in Magdeburg. Experts stress that the main reason for such incidents is Germany's migration policy. If someone has impunity, why shouldn't they steal or traffic things? It has gone too far. There is no going back in the West because it has gone too far. There is no political will to do what is necessary. To change it, you would have to change practically everything. Germany wants to get rid of the problem by sending illegal migrants back to other EU countries, including Poland. To this end, special centers for illegal migrants are to be set up in each of the 16 Länder.
Instead of another phase of the ceasefire, a return to full-scale war, a black scenario is beginning to materialize in the Gaza Strip. Last weekend marked the expiration of the first phase of the ceasefire, which was supposed to automatically transition into a second phase. However, this did not happen. Both sides are preparing to resume fighting. Israel is demanding the release of all hostages remaining in the hands of Hamas, while the militants, in turn, want the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the entire occupied part of the Gaza Strip. Withholding humanitarian aid and threatening to cut off water and electricity supplies, Israel implements drastic measures after Hamas rejects the proposal to extend the first phase of the ceasefire. I say to Hamas, if if you do not release our hostages. There will be consequences that you cannot imagine. Over the weekend, the deadline stipulated in an agreement reached in mid-January passed. According to that agreement, Tel Aviv was to now withdraw all its forces from Gaza. The problem is that Israel makes its occupation of the Gaza Strip conditional on the release of all hostages held by the terrorists.
We don't have an agreement on
We have no agreement on Phase 2. We demand the complete demilitarization of Gaza, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad, and that they give us back the hostages. If they agree to this, we can implement it even tomorrow. Hamas does not want to agree to extend the ceasefire under the original terms. Hence, both sides are threatening to resume the war. With such an action, the Israeli occupier is pushing to return everything to the starting point and cancel the agreement through its proposed alternatives, such as extending the first phase or creating an intermediate phase. This is not in line with what was stated in the agreement signed by both sides. The situation in the Middle East is being closely watched by Washington, D.C. The United States has committed to implementing the first phase of the agreement. In Israel, it is recognized that Donald Trump personally contributed to the ceasefire. He now admits that the negotiation decisions are up to Israel.
Decision has to be made by Israel, by Bibi, but Israel has to make that decision. We got a lot of hostages back. But it's very sad what happened to those people. I mean, you had a young lady with her hand practically blown off.
Today, Tel Aviv is leaving no illusions to Hamas. Either they release all the hostages, or all hell will break loose. If Hamas does not release the hostages soon, the gates of Gaza will be closed and the gates of hell will open. We will return to the fight, and they will confront the Israel Defense Forces with might and in a way they have never known until total victory. We will never allow Hamas to control Gaza. On the other side, however, is the coalition supporting Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. Tehran has just revealed that the subject of Iran's nuclear program has come up in Washington-Moscow talks. The Iranian nuclear issue is discussed between Russia and the U.S. as an international issue, but the important thing is that whatever is done on the Iranian nuclear issue will certainly not be done without Iran's opinion. This means that the Americans' diplomatic game is being played on many levels. Tehran is one of the biggest threats to Washington today. Hence, it is almost certain that with the current policy towards Europe, the United States will strengthen its position in the Middle East, using the Iran cards to raise the stakes of negotiations, for example, on the Ukraine issue.